Good afternoon and welcome to the Round Rock Sports Center. I'm Chad McKenzie and I'm fortunate enough to be the general manager of this great facility. And I'd like to thank you for coming out today, and if there's anything myself or any of our great staff can do for you while you're here, please do not hesitate to ask. And today I'm fortunate enough to get to introduce an outstanding basketball player, an even better person, mentor, and coach to young athletes. Mr. TJ Ford was a two-time state champion at Willow Ridge High School in Houston. He went on to become a college All-American at the University of Texas, won the prestigious Naismith College Player of the Year and John Wooden Awards, was named Player of the Year by Sports Illustrated, The Sporting News, ESPN.com, and CBS Sportsline. He was a top 10 pick in the 2003 NBA draft of the Milwaukee Bucks. Before his NBA career was cut short due to injury, he played for the Bucks, the Toronto Raptors, Indiana Pacers, and the San Antonio Spurs. To honor TJ Ford, his number 11 jersey was retired by the University of Texas, making him the fourth athlete in any sport and the first in basketball to have that honor, joining Earl Campbell, Ricky Williams, and Roger Clemens. Most recently, he was inducted into the University of Texas Hall of Honor in November of 2013. A natural-born leader, TJ is now turning his attention to rethinking youth basketball. He's started the TJ Ford Basketball Academy, and it has quickly turned into the premier youth basketball program for boys and girls in the greater Houston area. This past March, TJ chose the Round Rock Sports Center to host his inaugural TJ Ford Invitational, which included 51 teams, approximately 660 athletes, and over 500 spectators per hour for the three-day event. We're excited to continue the success of that first tournament for many years to come with TJ, and excited to have him with us today. Please help me extend a warm City of Round Rock welcome to Mr. TJ Ford.
Well, thank you, Chad, for the great introduction, and thank everybody for coming out and supporting not only the Round Rock Sports Center as well as the mayor. They both invited me, here to come down to express my experience that I had with the Round Rock Sports Center and the things that it would do to increase and involve the kids and also the community. I love this area. I love this facility. I've been in the sports industry my entire life. I played in many, many different facilities around the country, and this is by far the best facility that I experienced in the world. The detail, I think they executed every aspect of preparing not only the coaches, the referees, the parents, just to make sure that everything flows. And I was able to come in here, have an event in March, which we went back and did the numbers, had over 3,000 people that walked in and out of this facility over a three-day weekend. I'm excited because I feel Round Rock deserves more attention in the sports industry on the basketball side. It's a lot of talent here in Round Rock and the surrounding areas throughout Austin, even south, that does not have the same attention as a Dallas and as Houston, where I actually reside and live. This city is growing. I continue to try to be as supportive as I possibly can to be a community leader for these kids, to show that everything that I accomplished in my life has been more than I can ask for and more than I can envision. My vision was just to make it to the NBA. But the things that I was able to accomplish, I think my life is bigger and better and has more meaningful than being in the NBA. A lot of people see me grow. Everybody's seeing my transition from a high school player to college to making it to the NBA, and also showing my resilience to continue to fight back after having injury after injury, not knowing whether I'll be able to stand here in front of this podium or be carried up in a wheelchair. So my experience, I want to continue to give back to the community as best as my ability. And this facility will also generate a lot of revenue through all the local businesses. And you will see the transition of more people coming to Round Rock, because this facility is nothing like it, and I'm happy to just be able to be a part of it and continue to put some of the things that I'm implementing in Houston as far as my TJ Ford Basketball Academy to give back to kids. And in the future, I look forward to being part and teaming up with the Round Rock Sports Center of implementing these things within the community here in Round Rock and the surrounding areas as well. We're putting together a camp. That will be June 25th. We will put more details out about it here in the next couple weeks. So continue to just support what we're doing, because it's all about giving back and allowing kids to be around myself, and as well as some of my other NBA friends that will be in town throughout the summer here training and working out at the University of Texas. So we would love to get those guys here to do some events and also just show their support and their knowledge and give back their experience as well. So it's enough of me. You know, it's not about me. But again, this is a great facility here. I look forward to doing many, many more tournaments and spending a lot more time here at Round Rock. So now it's my pleasure to introduce another cheerleader for the Sports Center, your mayor, Alan McGraw.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. TJ, thanks for that introduction. Is that going to give that? You have no idea how much we appreciate you traveling all the way from Houston to Round Rock to help out with today's State of the City. And I think everyone actually came here to see you, not me, so that's okay. You know, we've been talking for months about doing this year's presentation at Sports Center. When I met with staff, I indicated that we needed to do something special to help draw attention to the center, like we had done when we had doctors and med students at the medical school. And immediately Chad McKenzie mentioned TJ and how much he thought of the Sports Center. So I asked very skeptically, you really think we can get one of the best basketball players to ever play the game to drive all the way from Houston just to introduce me? And Chad had two responses. He said the first was that TJ really does love this center, so that will help. But a second, more important, was that TJ really does love the chicken fried chicken across the street at Jack Allen's. And so if we can get him here for that, I think it'll work. So a couple of weeks ago, we actually met over a plate of chicken fried chicken at Jack Allen's and talked about all that TJ is involved in. And as you heard, he really does believe the Sports Center is one of the finest of its kind and has huge potential. You know, but what I really got out of that lunch with TJ was how much more he sees in basketball than just basketball. He sees the basketball as a tool for teaching our children the important life skills that they need, like discipline and hard work, learning how to win, learning how to lose, and teamwork. And TJ really brought home for me how much a facility like this can have a positive impact on people's lives in ways that we can never even imagine. So TJ, again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come be with us today, and especially for being such a positive role model to kids. You know, I said earlier that I knew from the minute that I walked in this facility that I wanted to use it for the state of the city. Over the years, we've used this speech to highlight some of the great additions to the city, like the medical school and the nursing school. So this year, it only seemed natural that we take the time to highlight our newest facility, the Round Rock Sports Center. You know, even though it opened in January, it's amazing how many positive comments I still get from people who are coming into it for the first time. I got a lot just as we were walking in the door. But I also had an ulterior motive for having it here. I wanted to use the Sports Center symbolically for what it says about our community. And if you look underneath the story of the Sports Center, you'll see a formula. On paper, it seems like a very simple formula, but in practice, it only works if we all execute. So what is that formula? Well, it starts with a big idea. Study it, examine it, poke holes in it, modify it, poke some more holes in it, and eventually turn it into some sort of a preliminary plan. Take that plan into the community and let them study it and examine it and poke holes in it. And eventually, through the thoughtful input of a lot of people, the preliminary plan becomes the final plan. And then that's where the fun part starts, executing the plan. You know, the same principles that TJ teaches his young teams are applicable to us. We've got to be disciplined, we've got to work hard, know how to win, even know how to lose, and especially know how to play as a team. If you think about the team, it's amazing how many different people come together to make things work. Often the city or school can help coordinate the plan, like we did with the sports center, or like the school district does with its bond proposals. But because of restrictions on public spending, the public body often can't go out and advocate for its own plan. And such was the case with the venue tax election for the sports center, and is the case right now for a very important bond election going on within Round Rock School District. So the public body must ultimately rely on the community for the plan to become a reality. And that's what happened with the sports center. This big idea was born years ago as a needed addition to the Sports Capital of Texas tourism effort. The idea was eventually turned into a plan, but only after lots of study and modifications, even completely changing the proposed site. But executing the plan required an enormous amount of support and coordination. It first needed the support of our local legislators who went to work passing a law to make the funding possible. Then it needed the support of the community by way of an election to authorize the venue tax. A dedicated group of individuals had to raise funds for an election, coordinate the messaging, and then run the campaign. Then it needed the hard work of a great staff. City Manager Steve Norwood set a very aggressive, and some staff would say an extremely aggressive, timeline for completing the project. They had to oversee its design, its construction, its staffing, and then its programming. And in the end, it opened on time and within budget. And what you see today speaks for itself about the success of the formula that I mentioned earlier. You know, but the unique thing about Round Rock is that the formula is not unique. It's been employed over and over again, and we know how to make it work. This is already the Round Rock Express's 15th anniversary. We got Chris and Reese here today. 15 years, guys. Congratulations on that. But think back to the effort to get them here. Led by Mayor Culpepper, it was the same formula. Have a big idea, make a plan, get community support, and then implement it. The point is, it worked yesterday, and it continues to work today. You know, this past year, the city enjoyed a number of successes. Some of them were big, like the Sports Center, and some of them were small, but with big results, like the installation of a number of right turn lanes. But the formula of planning, getting support, and implementation, it worked over and over again, just on a different scale. I'd like to spend a few minutes looking back at just a few of those successes over the past year and how they will positively impact our community. And the first one is a big one. Some would even characterize it as a game changer. It was the passage of a $123 million bond package in November. The first bond package since 2001 and 40,000 residents ago. Incidentally, it was another textbook example of the formula. Develop the plan, get support for the plan, and implement the plan. And it only passed because of the hard work of many, many people. Now, the reason that some refer to this particular bond package as a game changer is because of the projects involved. A big percentage of the projects were for the gold medal Parks and Recreation Department, which will enhance our quality of life for generations to come. These are the projects that 30 years from now, people will appreciate having even if they have no idea where they came from. Projects like the Heritage Trail and the bathing beach will bring Brushy Creek to life and give us more reasons to be outdoors. And it's no secret that safety has been a priority for our community. So the Police and Fire Joint Training Facility and the new fire station improvements will go a long way towards fulfilling this goal. And while I'm talking safety, I would be remiss if I didn't introduce our new police chief, Chief Alan Banks. What a great asset to the communities he's already been. You know, the proposed library improvements are critical to improving educational and employment opportunities for our growing population. The libraries of today are much different from what I remember as a child. In the old days, it seemed their only function was to house a collection of books. It was a place to research with World Book encyclopedias, for those of you who remember those. Today, our downtown libraries are literally busting at the seams with programming of events. It provides access to technology who have no other way to access it. Yes, Councilmember Clifford, there are still old-fashioned paper books in the library. But with the passage of the bonds for library improvements, we will be able to keep up not only with ever-changing technology, but with ever-changing demands on what a library system should be and what it should provide. You know, another success this past year was not really a single success, but plural. It was a continued success of an ongoing effort, and that being economic development and diversification. Many, many years ago, our community made it a priority to transform Round Rock from a bedroom suburb into an economic, business-based city, a place where their children could return to work and raise a family. And I'd say the results of that vision have been nothing short of staggering. But with that success has also come its challenges. Today, the economic development efforts have become more and more targeted and more focused on diversification of the economy. Now think back to our efforts to recruit the premium outlets and IKEA as major destination retailers and major importers of sales tax into the city. Today, through efforts like this, our reliance on a single source of sales tax is much less than it was even just a few years ago. But that effort continues. Bass Pro Shops will open its doors either later this year or early next year. Bass Pro Shops will open its doors either later this year or early next year. If there's anywhere you're going to applaud in the speech, this is it. Okay. As many of you know, Bass Pro is one of the premier destination retailers in the country and will be a huge source of additional sales tax and great jobs. Now, it didn't happen by accident, but was a culmination of over a decade of trying to establish that relationship. I'm just wondering if they have enough room to hold next year's State of the City speech. The diversification effort has not just been about sales tax, but it's also been about different industries. Our healthcare and education industries really began to sprout a number of years ago, and they continue to expand today. Cornerstone Long-Term Acute Care Hospital, for example, opened this year, providing the closest long-term acute care hospital in the region. Now, combined with our other great healthcare facilities, Round Rock is becoming known as a true destination for healthcare. Now, the real success of economic development, in my opinion, is not a particular business, but the very process itself. The partnership between the city and the chamber is unique. Our Momentum Economic Development Partnership is a great example of the power of teamwork. You know, during our economic development trips in California, it became painfully obvious that businesses like stability and consistency. And I believe that's what the partnership provides and why I call it such a big success. And speaking of stability and consistency, the One-Stop Development Services Office continues to be our shining star in economic development. The bottom line for businesses, whether from California or already here, is that time is money, and a city's inefficiencies or poor processes hurt not only that specific business, but the economy as a whole. Which is why I'm so proud to say that the development philosophy statement that the council adopted a number of years ago has been and continues to be adhered to. We're always striving to improve, but our staff has made great strides in implementing the vision of the council and of this community. Now, I mentioned earlier that part of the planning process involves poking holes in it, modifying it, poking more holes in it, modifying it even more, and probably nothing exemplifies this process more than the adoption of the downtown zoning this past year. There were literally hundreds of stakeholders in the process, landowners, businesses, residents. They met numerous times to offer input into the plan. In the end, the zoning plan that was adopted was far superior because of that input. The result is a long-term guide to the development of downtown that emphasizes respect for existing uses and residents. You know, our longtime downtown merchants, along with the new restaurants, the new entertainment venues, have successfully branded downtown as one of the premier destinations for visitors and residents. And the growth potential is great. One of the small successes as part of downtown was the opening of these additional downtown parking lots. A lot east of City Hall is providing much needed relief, but the new lot just behind Main Street Grill and Curly's Barbecue is a huge benefit for downtown merchants. Another success this past year, both from a downtown standpoint and an economic development standpoint, is the city's acquisition of the Builders Gypsum plant behind City Hall. Builders Gypsum has been a great corporate partner for the city, generating a tremendous amount of sales tax. And as part of the relocation, they will remain in Round Rock and are building a new facility on Chisholm Trail. But for downtown, their site will almost double the size of the historic downtown. And once developed, this site will create even more synergy for the residents, visitors, and businesses in downtown. Now, from a transportation standpoint, our transportation department continues to do everything possible to relieve traffic congestion throughout the city. One of the most important efforts has also been one of the least expensive. Throughout town, there's a number of intersections without right turn lanes. The effect is that one car has the ability to block literally dozens from making a right turn. As a result, the Transportation Department developed a program to add right turn lanes to critical intersections and has been in the process of implementing that plan. The Redbud Lane projects and Highway 3406 projects are examples of the huge difference that a very small amount of pavement can make. Now, on the large project side, the Chisholm Trail improvements were recently completed, providing a much-needed north-south arterial on the western side of the city. We also settled our litigation with Union Pacific over the rights to McNeil Road. As part of that settlement, UP agreed to expedite the much-requested quiet zones and contribute $100,000 to the Baylor Bridge Memorial that we are working on. And today, Steve Sheets will tell you that we have the best relationship with UP that we've ever had. You know, from a regional standpoint, I've been involved for the last couple of years with a regional transit task force called Project Connect. This group was charged at looking at viable transit alternatives in the region. Initially, the group looked at the entire region of Central Texas, and then later I was asked to chair an effort that focused just on the northern portion of that corridor. Gary Hutter and our Transportation Department joined other regional partners to examine numerous alternatives and look for a transit framework that was viable for the region. In the end, after a tremendous amount of work and community involvement, the locally preferred alternative was prepared, and it was presented 2 weeks ago at a big event held at Del Diamond. Folks, the reality is that we have a regional transportation problem. There's no magic bullet that will solve the problem. It's critical that we continue to build roads to address our growth, but it's also critical that we look at alternative forms of transportation that, again, are economically viable. And that locally preferred alternative provides a good framework for moving forward. The one option that won't work is doing nothing. Now, the last success I want to mention involves neighborhood revitalization. A number of years ago, the council adopted revitalization of neighborhoods as one of its strategic priorities. To expedite that goal, the city manager recently created a neighborhood coordinator position and then found a great person for the job. Joe Breen basically came into the position and created that job from scratch. And the results over the last year have been far in excess of our expectations. Joe coordinated the first ever neighborhood conference, where he brought together neighborhood leaders from all over the community to focus on issues common to neighborhoods. He helped coordinate the creation of neighborhood associations in older neighborhoods, and he acted as a liaison for neighborhoods as they deal with zoning and other issues. And he coordinated the establishment of the neighborhood tool trailer, which is available to neighborhoods to assist with their cleanup efforts. This tool lending center, as he calls it, was deployed just a few weeks ago in downtown Round Rock with the help of the Heart of Round Rock Neighborhood Association. The bottom line is that with the cooperation of a number of groups, businesses, and people, and with Joe's creative leadership, the neighborhood revitalization effort has seen tremendous strides over this past year and is literally improving by the day. Now, when you look back at some of these successes over the past year, you've got to ask yourself, did this happen by accident? Was this just random, or was it part of some overall plan? And the answer for most of it is that it was part of an overall plan. Some things, like the Union Pacific letter that showed up one day asking for millions of dollars, they're not really planned for but must be adapted to. But most of the projects that I just talked about have been part of an overall plan that's been developed by the council. It's the strategic planning process that we work through each year. And we've always developed overall strategic priorities for the city. I can remember back when Jim Noose was city manager and he carried around this wrinkled up poster board with 4 or 5 priorities written in magic marker. Those priorities had been developed through a thoughtful, deliberate process with the council. Today, there's still a thoughtful, deliberate process that we go through on a regular basis, but the work product provides more of a consistent and measurable framework. When Steve Norwood became city manager, he implemented the same strategic planning process that he had been using for a number of years, using an incredibly talented facilitator. That first year's session was a real challenge because they were basically starting from scratch in Round Rock. You know, the council remembers those grueling days on that first year. But the actual goals and priorities weren't that much different than the goals and the priorities we had already been focusing on for a number of years. But each one had to be validated, prioritized, and put in this new format. Importantly, we didn't just end up with some broad-based priorities. Rather, we developed some specific actions that needed to be taken by staff to implement those priorities. It's this classic management model for the city. The council develops the policy objectives and the staff implements them. Once we got through that first year, our strategic planning meetings continued, but we had a slightly different format. Rather than starting from scratch, we were now re-examining the previous year's priorities to determine if they were still priorities. And perhaps more importantly, we were comparing our goals from the previous year to what was actually accomplished. In other words, the plan itself provides a reliable way to hold the staff accountable. If we prioritize Project A, then at the end of the year, we can look and see if Project A was accomplished. Almost every one of those successes I outlined earlier was included in last year's strategic plan as action items. Of course, here's where it gets a little tricky. Many of the priorities are not short-term that can be accomplished within the year. Many, like especially some of Gary's major transportation projects, can take years, and in those cases, the plan still provides measurable milestones along the way. Now, the reason I'm spending time on this strategic planning process is I want the citizens to understand that in any given year, we're not just randomly deciding what to pursue and what not to pursue, but rather it's part of an overall plan that's been developed through this very deliberate, thoughtful process. And interestingly, our facilitator, Lyle Sumac, believes that only about 20% of cities actually do any kind of strategic planning. In fact, I was given one book by an author who suggests that cities shouldn't do any planning. I think he was actually mad about a train that was coming near his house and therefore rationalized that the long-term planning of the city had caused his problem. But here in Round Rock, we will continue to plan both for the short term and for the long term. We will continue to re-examine the plan and be adaptive to circumstances, and we will continue to use the plan to hold staff accountable for implementing the policies. But there's another benefit to the plan that's even more important than holding staff accountable. And that is that it gives the citizens a basis for holding us as elected leadership accountable. You have the right to look at the plan too. You may decide you don't like the plan, that a policy should be different, or you may like the plan but not see the results. Either way, it provides the citizens a way to grade their elected officials. And you know, that's the great thing about our political system. It gives us an opportunity and a format to debate the future of our community. That's what the system is supposed to work like. If we were in Crimea or Kiev right now, we wouldn't be so fortunate. But thankfully here, once we have the debate, sometimes we have a passionate debate, we can all continue to work together as a community, knowing that our great system works better than any place in the world. So what's in that strategic plan I keep talking about? And don't worry, I'm not going to go into it in detail. That would literally take all day, and I can see that TJ is getting restless. But I do want to mention briefly the overall long-term priorities of the council. These are the guiding principles from which the individual actions will follow. Basically, we just ask the question, what do you want to see the city look like in 5 to 15 years? And our first long-term goal is maintaining a financially sound city that provides high-value services. We want the city to be financially sound, but we want the citizens to feel that they are getting a good value for their taxes. We've also got to focus on city infrastructure, both current and future. The citizens are investing literally millions of dollars in infrastructure, whether it's roads or parks or buildings. And just as with our personal homes and businesses, we've got to maintain that infrastructure and protect the investment. Our downtown will continue as a priority. We see it continuing to develop into an authentic downtown that's an exciting destination for the community. And we also see the continued emphasis on the Sports Capital of Texas tourism effort. As you see from here, it's working both for businesses and for the residents. You know, looking into the future, we see Round Rock is continuing to be a great community in which to live. That's obviously a very broad statement and encompasses many different areas, whether it's being safe, having access to libraries and parks, or even having the ability to thrive economically. We will always need to focus on that overall quality of life. And finally, but certainly not least, we must have sustainable neighborhoods as we move forward. Our quality of life really does start at home, so it's imperative that we do what we can to maintain or improve the experience within the neighborhood. You know, each of these 6 items I mentioned are long-term priority goals of the council. Of course, by themselves, they might sound good, they might be worthwhile objectives, but the real question is, how do you achieve them? And this is where the strategic planning process really begins to be effective. Underneath each of these priorities is a long, long list of items that require some sort of action and action that can be measured. So just in the last few minutes, I want to highlight a few of these top priority actions so you'll know what to expect over the next year. There is no way I can touch on all of them. I just want you to get a sense of the projects that we'll be working on. The first is a focus on traffic on the University Boulevard corridor. Right, Gary? It's no secret that traffic has gotten out of control as University gets closer to the interstate. There are multiple projects going on in that area. One is the first of its kind in Texas, the Virgin Diamond Interchange, or as I call it, the French Connection. It's the TxDOT project, and it's literally ready to go. But there's another project going on, which is the widening of University to 6 lanes divided. And we're trying to better coordinate those projects to have the least disruption as possible. The creek bend extension is another top priority item. Part of the traffic problem near the western side of the interstate is the lack of a north-south creek crossing. We previously partnered with the county to widen Wyoming Springs in anticipation of the creek bend extension. Thank you, Commissioner Berkman. And we appreciate that cooperation for the project. Now, the current status of the creek bend project is we're doing a tremendous amount of testing to make sure the road can be built. As you know, the area along that creek is very sensitive, contains a number of voids, and the last thing we want to do is get under construction and find another interspace caverns. So based on those tests, we're going to determine exactly how to proceed and where the construction plans need to be modified. Now, there's several top priority projects that affect downtown. The first is the Builders Gypsum site development that I mentioned earlier. We have a tremendous opportunity with that tract as it greatly expands the footprint of historic downtown. However, we need to do it right. We would rather be patient with it and do it right than try to rush it just for the sake of developing it. So to that end, we've already issued an RFQ looking for qualified partners. Our next step will be an RFP process where we ask for specific proposals. At this stage, we're looking for ideas from people in the business. We aren't just looking for pretty pictures, but for viable alternatives that the market will support. A second downtown project involves infrastructure in eastern downtown. In order to complement the downtown zoning that was recently adopted, we need to develop a master infrastructure plan. Quality development cannot occur without proper drainage and utilities, so we will be working on a plan of the work that needs to be done and how it can be funded. Of course, the reconstruction of Main Street and the realignment of Round Rock Avenue with Main Street will actually begin construction this year. The end result, which will include the memorial to the historically significant Baylor bus tragedy, will be a greatly improved downtown infrastructure. Now, another top priority involves our Sports Capital of Texas tourism plan. This really is an amazing facility. Just like the fields at Old Settlers Park were an amazing facility just a few years back. But the question we have to ask is, what's the next big thing? Whether it's changing technology or competition, every successful business must continue to look for the future. If you look back how many years it took for the Sports Center to get from idea to the very first slam dunk, you realize it's not too early to start planning. The planning will start with questions like, what sports are we missing out on? What's the market? And how can it be funded? So over the next year, we anticipate further refining that plan. One of the top priorities will continue to be economic development and diversification. You know, this is one of those areas where I can't tell you exactly what the next success will be, because that's not the way the system works. Instead, this is one of those areas where we put the system in place to quickly respond to opportunities. It's much like fishing or hunting. The preparation that goes on is at the front end, from equipment to practice to finding the right location. Ultimately, you can't control the fish or the game, but you can do everything in your power to prepare for it. And that's what our economic development efforts will continue to do. That's where our partnership with the Chamber, Ben White, and their great team is so important. And of course, there's always the issue of water. The citizens have responded admirably to conservation efforts, and our per capita use is significantly down. But we will continue to put our long-term water needs at the forefront of our priorities. You know, the hardest thing about writing this speech is what not to put in it. I would love to talk about things like developing staffing models, the library location, reuse water ordinances, low utility and tax rates, bond ratings, road paving, park maintenance, and on, but there's just not enough time. And I think that in itself says the most about Round Rock and the state of our community. That's probably why the Millikan Institute recently recognized Round Rock as being the #1 city in Texas where citizens are getting the biggest bang for their buck. Our facilitator, Lyle, he always makes great points about decisions. He stresses that every decision we make, or every non-decision, will have an impact on the future in some way. Just look back at that decision to build Del Diamond over 15 years ago and how that turned out. So my pledge to you as mayor is that the council and I will not take these decisions lightly. We recognize that our decisions have implications both now and in the future. We will continue to plan, reassess the plan, and be accountable. I think that's how we remain successful and maintain Round Rock is one of the best cities in the United States. And before I close, I need to thank a lot of people. I need to thank TJ Ford, who really did travel all the way from Houston to make this possible. TJ, we really appreciate our working with you and look forward to a great relationship working with you in the future. And I need to thank City Manager Steve Norwood and Assistant City Managers Lori Hadley and Brian Williams, because they're the ones that Council ultimately holds responsible for implementing our plan, and it seems to me they're doing a great job in responding to our vision. I need to thank the community members who give tirelessly to make it a better place. You know, when I was speaking earlier of the formula that worked, it always included members of the community that could be counted on to get their hands dirty in committees and groups or just provide input. The system will never work without that involvement. So that's where you give yourself a hand. And I especially need to thank the City Council for their sacrifice and commitment to the city that they love. Joe, Carlos, Chris, George, John, and Craig, you all have been a great support to me over the years. You'll never know how much that means to me and how much I appreciate the thoughtful collaboration that we've shared over these years. And finally, I've got to thank my wife, Kathy. You've always been a rock for me during this journey. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes it's not, but you've always been there. So thank you. You know, looking back over these last 6 years, there's several ways to judge the time. One way is I no longer have any kids here watching my speeches. Paige was just 15 when she introduced me at that very first State of the City speech, and now she's a young lady getting ready to travel the world. I guess I could use John Garrett as a guide and go figure out how many newspapers John has started around the state of Texas since I've been mayor. Great job, John. By the way, if you happen to have seen John walking around with this busted lip, it will be obvious that he got hornswaggled into believing that basketball is not a contact sport. But TJ will tell you it is a contact sport. You know, but I think the best thing to do is just not worry about the past. Instead of focusing on the past, we need to keep looking towards the future. Our city has been blessed beyond belief. So much that I think I'll give a plug for tomorrow's National Day of Prayer event at Texas Baptist Children's Home at noon. I personally think it works, and I intend to be there praying for our community. So thank you all for coming today, and thank you all for all that you do for our community.